Hello, this is Michael McCarthy. In this video, we're going to take a look at using Phoenix FD to create two liquids with two different colors and have them simulate together and mix together. The first thing we'll need to do in order to create something like this is create two sources, each with a different color, and both of those sources pouring into one simulator. The next thing we'll need to do is assign a material to that simulator that can distinguish between those two sources. Finally, we're going to need to take our material and do a little bit of extra work so that we don't get a circular dependency when we assign it to the simulator. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we're going to need to do is create a simulator. So let's go to Create Geometry, Phoenix FD, and choose Simulator. I'll set the grid to something like 75 by 75 by 40. That's going to give us a nice little simulator here. The next thing we should do is create our geometry for emitting into the simulator. So let's just create a couple of simple cylinders. Create one cylinder like so. And I'm just going to copy that using Shift Drag. This one will give a color just for visual reference of blue. And this one will give a color of red, again, only for visual reference. And we'll rotate those into place. So I'm going to turn on angle snap, rotate that 90 degrees, and point it into my simulator. We're just going to use the cap of this in order to emit fluids from, or liquids from. So we should be okay with just pointing that cap in there. We'll do the same with our second one. And once we have these positioned properly, you might just want to rename them. Just call this blue emit, red emit, and mix sim. So now we have our geometry, our simulator, and finally we're going to need to create our sources. Let's go to Create Helpers. From the drop down, choose Phoenix FD and choose either Phoenix Source, or a little bit quicker would be to choose Phoenix Liquid, which is a customized source for liquids. I'm going to drag that one out. I'll make a quick copy of it. And again, I'm just going to color them for visual reference, blue and red. In the Modify panel for the blue one, we want to, of course, pick our blue cylinder. And one thing we want to do is scroll down to the bottom. And at the bottom, I'm going to choose to emit from polygon ID 1, which should be this face polygon. The next thing I'm going to do is make sure that I am including the RGB channel, and I'm going to color that blue. For the red one, I'll kind of put it over this side and do the same thing. We'll pick our cylinder. We'll say that we want to use the polygon ID 1, check RGB, and set this to red. Now let's select our simulator. We go to the Modify panel. There's a couple of things we want to set up. First is that we're emitting liquids. So let's check Enable for liquids. Next is, under Output, we want to make sure that we have RGB chosen. So in the Output rollout, check RGB. Now we can do a quick simulation and see what we get. I'm going to choose Start. And you can see the liquids come out. We have blue for our blue liquid, and we have red for our red liquid. Now, right now, you're seeing something that is a little bit more than liquids. I'm just going to click Stop here. And that's the full RGB channel. Let's go down to our preview, and you can see we can toggle on RGB and or wavelet, and you'll see that RGB channel. Now, RGB is going to color not only the liquid, but the air around it so that it can properly shade the surface. So that's what you see when you see a little bit bigger portion of this. Now, if we want to just see the RGB channel so we can get an idea of the color, and we want to see really just the liquids, we can use this option, which is and condition, which will basically just shade the liquids that are coming out with the RGB. Now you can see we certainly have an issue where our liquid is going through our grid, so let's go into the grid and let's set our boundary conditions to jammed on both. This way our liquid will kind of build up for this test and won't go through the floor or through the walls. So now we can go back to simulation and choose start. You can see the simulation come in, the liquid splash together, and they start to fill up. You can also see the mixing of the liquid colors even in the preview here in the viewport. I'll let this run through quickly. And there we go. I can play this back. And you can see those splash together and then they start to kind of work the color together. We'll give ourselves a little bit more time. Let me set this to 300 for our next simulation. Now to get a little better mixing here, I think I'm going to introduce a force. So let's go into Space Warps, and I'm just going to drag out a quick vortex. Drag that vortex out there, move it up a bit. And in the vortex I may increase the axle drop some and decrease that radial pull. Let's just do another quick simulation. I'll choose start. Now the liquid should come in. They will be affected by the vortex. You can see them splash a little bit past each other here. And then they're going to start swirling around and mixing together. So I'm going to let this simulate through. And I think actually that 100 frames starts to give us a good idea of the mixing. So I'm going to choose stop. I'll set this back to 111. Now the next thing we're going to have to set up is the material, because if we go and render this, you're going to see that we just get a basic non-colored liquid, and if we put a material on it, it'll just be gray. So I'll open up the material editor and we'll apply material to our object. One other thing I'm going to set is under preview. I'm just going to uncheck this only if selected. That way when we deselect it we can actually get an idea of what's going on here. So as you can see, we've applied this material and we'll really just have a gray material here coming in. Let's go ahead and change that. In the diffuse color, I want to choose our Phoenix FD text map. And that's going to give us access to a bunch of different channels in our simulator, including the RGB channel. So I'll put that in the diffuse. And what we want to do is under channels, choose RGB. Now this is where the tricky part comes in, because if we choose this as the source node, as well as assign it to the same object, we're going to get that circular redundancy or dependency. So what we want to do is create another simulator that we can reference. Now this is pretty simple to do. Let's go to Create, Geometry, and from the drop-down choose Phoenix FD. We don't really have to worry too much about this simulator, its size, or anything else, because we're really just going to point it to the output cache of this one. That's another reason why it was so important to make sure the output has the RGB channel. So let's just select this simulator and copy its name. And this will be a quick and easy way to point this one at this one's simulation cache. We'll go into Input. And under Input, if we just put the name of this simulator after the sim output condition, we'll see that we'll have that there. So here we're seeing all the RGB. We don't have that preview option on, but that's okay. We can use this one just to see all the RGB channel here. And from this, we can actually reference. So let's, under source node, click on none, and we can pick this. And we can then select this object. This is our original mix sim, and we can apply that material. And this is something that we wouldn't be able to do before. Now we don't really need to worry about this one anymore. We can hide it or do whatever we want with it. I'm just going to hide it. And now when we render, we should start to see those colors come through. So you can see this blue and you can see this red and the mixing in between. Let me just go down towards the end here where we can see some of that mixing happening. Now we want to go back to the parent material, and under diffuse you can see that if we render this out, it's very light, the liquid color that we're getting, and that's kind of dependent on this diffuse. We'll bring that all the way down to a completely black color, and then you'll see that we start to get the rich color of the blue and red and the nice mixing together here. Another thing we may want to do, especially in this instance, you can see that on the edges that we can see through, it may become difficult to shade. There's a little option here under tiling for mirror, and with the mirror option, if you render this, we'll be able to see the color through the wall, which would be something that would be difficult. This is really something good for this particular instance because we can see through the wall, but I do find in production it's not something that you often see through that wall unless of course the liquid is coming up against some glass or something of that nature. Okay, so we've successfully set up our mix material for the RGB, and you can see that we have the blue liquid coming out, the red liquid coming out, and then mixing together. We've added in a force here. Let's do some quick house cleaning. Let me just go into our blue source and call it that. I'll rename the red source as well. And if I want to hide or unhide this one here, you know, I can kind of see those RGB values. I'll go into preview and I'll also choose that only if selected option so that I can see these no matter what. So if I want to hide or unhide or freeze this so that I don't select it, I can do any of those things. Now let's take a look at where you might use this texture in a Vray material. Until now we're just using the base scanline renderer, and you can see that that works very well. If we wanted to add a ray trace material to this, we could, and we could use this color in the ray trace material. If we're going to use Vray, which I'll switch over to now, we can set up a Vray material for this. So I'm going to choose Vray Advanced, and in the material editor I'll just go over here and we'll choose a Vray material. I'm just going to choose Vray material and we'll apply that to our simulator. So now we have the Vray material applied. I'm going to choose this map. I'll say copy, and we can paste this. Now we can do the same thing that we did before. I can paste a instance of this or a copy of it in the diffuse map, and let's just do a quick render. You can see that come up and Vray render it. We'll do the same thing that we did before with a standard material, and we'll change this color to black so that we can get, you know, that nice color out of it. And then we can go in and give this maybe a little bit of reflection. It might be a bit too much. And certainly some refraction. And do a quick render. So you can see the liquid come through there, and we can kind of start to see through like so. I'll add in a Vray camera as well so that we can kind of see what's going on here. So let's go to create cameras, Vray, and we'll just take that Vray physical camera with it selected. I'm going to hit Control C to frame it up on this view, and then we're going to add in a material for our environment. So in the environment, I'll choose the Vray sky. Just drag it in here so that we have access to it. This will give us something to reflect and refract to make sure that we're looking through our camera view. So now you can see those liquids come through. Cancel that rendering out. But of course, in the diffuse color, we're losing a bit of the color there. So let's go into our material editor. And under this material, This may be something that we want to add to the fog color. So let's just drag it down to fog color. And we could say instance, or in this case I'll just say swap, and render that out. You can see that we're going to get much more of that liquid color if we add it into the fog color there. And of course, another good option, we can adjust the amount of that fog multiplier. So let's bring that down to maybe a 0.3. And that's giving us a little bit more of what we want. Maybe even something a bit lower, so we can see the colors and the mixing overall. That's looking pretty good. Now another last option that you can use, of course, for putting this material into your liquids is just in the reflection color. So I'm just going to cut it out of here, or sorry, refraction color, and pop it in here. And that's going to give you that color for your refraction. So I'll bring this back up to 1, even though we're not using it, I guess, just to have it at the defaults. And I find this gives us some nice coloring of the liquids too, really kind of dependent upon what you're looking for to get out of your liquids and the color balance. But I find that those 3 places for putting in this color can certainly help when you're designing your liquids and having them mixed together. So let's just hide out these emitters. We'll zoom in a little bit. Take a look at our safe frame. And we'll do a little bit of a larger render. So we'll take this to 720p. So there you go. This is how you take your 2 liquids, assign them a value for color and RGB, and how you can kind of mix them together using Phoenix FD. I hope you enjoyed this, and it'll allow you to do mixing liquids in your productions in the future. Thank you very much.